Welcome to Watch Your Mouth, the official podcast of the Ministry of Health and Wellness's Oral Health Unit. I'm your host, Dr. Chanel Demsto-Peart, and today we're exploring a critical and often overlooked area, oral health and the law. Joining us is Netricia Miller, attorney at law who brings 27 years of legal expertise. She has spent the last 16 years as the Senior Assistant Attorney General and Head of Legal Services at the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Ms. Miller, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In today's episode, we'll delve into the important relationship between law and dentistry, and Ms. Miller will help us unpack the 4 R's. Let's get started and shed light on how law intersects with oral health, ensuring safe and ethical practices for all. Ms. Miller, what's the relationship between public health and the law at a high level?
Essential.
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 Okay, so you talk about 4 R's.
Yes.
What's the first one?
The first R would be regulatory.
Tell me a little bit more.
The law regulates oral health. And interestingly, when I do speak on the matter of law and public health, we always start from the position of the Constitution. Many people do not recognize that the Constitution authorizes government to govern for the common good order. Also, that health forms part of that common good of the society. If we look at Section 48 of the Constitution, it empowers government to govern in a particular way, and that is for the good and order of the nation. Public health, including dentistry, falls in that category. And so from the standpoint of the Constitution, it is regulatory. Government has that duty. And then you can look at the Dental Act that regulates the training and practice of dentistry.
Yes, so Dental Act, its regulations also help us to understand that framework that governs dental health. Now another R would be there, because there are 4.
There are 4.
What's the other R?
The other R would be rights.
Tell me more.
And interesting, I love the Constitution. When you look at the Constitution empowers government to regulate, but also in the Constitution, it empowers the citizenry and establishes rights, freedoms within the same document. So one would say there's tension, regulatory power and rights. And so the citizenry has certain rights. Due process we know, but also there is a question of the right to health. Certain rights such as autonomy, the issue of consent, the right to care or a duty, which is the responsibility of oral health professionals, the duty of care. You also have the right to privacy. So the dental health practitioners would recognize the ethical principles such as consent, confidentiality, care, and there's the issue of commerce that we don't speak to a lot. Commerce.
Yes.
Yes. So you have this area of public health and trade. And so if you remember during the COVID period, a lot of trade issues came up. And then you have to now find out the interests of commercial activity at the same time. So all of that falls under rights.
So we spoke about rights. I know that in our health centers we have displayed the Charter of Rights for patients. Any comments on that?
The Charter of Rights for patients? Well, the fact is, there is the law, international law speaks to the right to health. And it is something that is probably not fully explored in dental health, and something that needs to be fully explored because in terms of Jamaica, the right to health is still an issue that needs to be delved into. If you look in, under the Constitution, you will see that there's no right to health. But then there are certain presumptions, and then there are certain obligations under international law that requires the government to ensure that there's right to health. So in terms of the right, the Charter of Rights, it's very important. It's a start.
It's a start.
It's a start.
Do you think the public knows their rights enough?
I'm not too sure if they know their rights, but it's something that we will always have to speak to and advocate. The issue of right to health is still an issue that the international legal system is trying to flesh out and to get us to understand and to provide certain strategies in terms of ensuring the right to health. But there are other rights already established under the Constitution that I believe secures against discrimination, secures against violation, and so on. So I think the common citizenry understands at a certain level their right.
2 are so far. On to the third. Tell us more.
The third R would be risk. And this takes in the other partner in public health.
Yes.
And that would be the oral health practitioners. Risks. The mere fact that you practice is a risk. So you need to be aware of all the risk.
Yes.
And in terms of your criminal liability, your civil liability, you know, so there's always risk in the mix. And of course, you have your regulatory, your compliance issues, because if you look at the Dental Health Act, it regulates training.
Yes.
It regulates your practice.
Registration.
And also it safeguards the citizenry.
Yes.
In terms of you must be skilled, qualified, registered, etc., etc. And so in terms of unregistered dentists, unqualified oral health practitioners, that's a risk to the profession as a whole, but also their own risk in terms of practice, duty of care. Were you conscious and did you apply confidentiality, privacy? They talk about the Data Protection Act. That's just an extension of the old concept of confidentiality that dental health practitioners are aware of from their ethics training, etc., etc. And so there are a lot of risk. There are matters that have been brought before the court. There are matters coming out of decisions from the Dental Council that have gone to the tribunal, etc., etc. So it's a very active environment, and you have to be very cautious in terms of how you practice.
You said that risk is always there, and I know one of the things that we ensure patients are aware of is those risks, and we get what we call informed consent. Any thoughts on that for the oral health providers who are in the system?
All public health practitioners, including oral health practitioners, must be aware of the necessity of informed consent. It is very important. I think there was a recent case. There was this English case of, I'm forgetting the case now, but that case was referred to in the matter of Octavia Spence. I think this was a matter coming out of Spanish Town.
Yes, the name sounds familiar.
Yes, forgive me if I didn't get the name, but it's an Octavia Spence case. And the court in Jamaica referred to the English case, speaking about the need for informed consent. And so it has taken the issue of consent to another realm. It has stipulated what constitutes informed consent. And so that clearly is law in Jamaica now.
Regulatory risk. We've spoken about rights.
Yes.
What's the fourth R?
The fourth R would be response. Response to all of the previous 3 R's. How do you deal with it? And this also is within the legal realm. How do you deal with risks? And when you hear the word risk, you think about risk management. Yes, it's not something that is beyond the public health practitioners, nor is it exclusive. Do you know what I learned?
What?
I've learned a lot working in the Ministry of Health. And I was shocked when I realized that health professionals know about management.
Yes. Because management speaks a lot about risk and risk management. Yes.
And when I found out that was, what you call it, clinical management. Clinical management.
Yes.
And so risk management is a part of public health practitioners' practice.
Yes.
Risk management.
What's likely, what's not unlikely.
Exactly. And you're in the business of doing that already. So sometimes when you hear this thing about risk management, the doctors, the dentists know about it long time ago. I learned through them. And through the policies and procedures that they have, they speak about clinical management. And so risk management is not a far-fetched principle outside of the oral health practice. And so you have to manage risk. One of the issues coming up is, everybody's talking about the Data Protection Act. Oh, that's not new. Oral health practitioners and public health practitioners have been dealing with the ethical issue of confidentiality. And the Data Protection Act is really an extension and basically a codification of the principles dealing with confidentiality that would have governed the oral health practitioners' practice over the years, and even medical practitioners' practice. So you're talking about risk management so how do you respond? Risk management. How do you respond? Record management. And record management has a whole gamut of its own framework. And so just now the Data Protection Act falls within that record management.
Could we put that on the regulatory as well then?
Regulatory, yes, the Data Protection Act.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so risk management, record management. And then you'd have to look at reform. Reform is something that is constant. Constant. You might not hear a lot about reviews and amendments in terms of the Dental Act and so on. But of course you have the Data Protection Act, which is a new legislation, and that's reform in itself. And so reform, legal reform, where you review what is happening on the ground, you review what is working, you review whether or not provisions under the law is archaic, and so on, and you see whether or not international norms and standards will inform you to change and amend the legislation or provide for new legislation that allows us to work better and efficiently. The second, or under that, so I spoke about response, risk management, record management, and the issue of reform, but also, or response, there's a response, because the relationship between law and oral health, there must be a response, and the response would be, what is the legal impact? How does law advance oral health? Once you have them working together properly, and it is enforced, etc., etc. Now, when you look at law, what is the impact? It must be to prevent, promote, and protect. And also, it sets the basis to monitor and evaluate performance. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. Ms. Miller, we could sit here and we could talk about this overlooked area so much longer. But unfortunately, we're gonna have to wrap here. Before you go though, every guest on Watch Your Mouth has to give us what we call a last lick, one parting word. What's yours?
Sunshine.
Sunshine, tell me more.
Sunshine, I think I'm in my sunshine stage. Yes, I am enjoying life. And what better place than here? Sunshine.
Beautiful
Smile.
Jamaica.
Beautiful.
Smiling, and the smile radiates like the sun, so I can see the relationship. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Watch Your Mouth. A heartfelt thank you to Netricia Miller for sharing her deep insights into the legal side of oral health. Your expertise on the 4 R's has provided us with a clearer understanding of how regulation, rights, risk, and response shape the dental landscape in Jamaica. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, a strong legal framework is essential for protecting both patients and practitioners alike. Stay informed, keep smiling, and join us next time for Watch Your Mouth as we continue to explore the many facets of oral health in our community.